What if I told you that beneath the ruins of ancient cathedrals, beneath the dust of forgotten crusades, and buried in coded parchments sealed centuries ago, lies the untold truth of a brotherhood that once ruled the world from the shadows? Knights Templar, warrior monks clad in white, sworn to poverty, piety, and power. From humble beginnings protecting pilgrims on a dusty road to Jerusalem, they rose to become the world's first multinational military corporation. Kings feared them, popes depended on them. And when did they become too powerful? They were hunted like heretics. But did they truly vanish in the flames of Friday the 13th? Or did the Templars and their secrets simply go underground? Get ready for a cinematic edge-of-your-seat journey into real history, with all the intrigue of a Hollywood thriller. By the time your eyes close, you'll never look at the Middle Ages the same way again. If you're already hooked, imagine what's coming next. Go ahead, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves epic true stories. This one's a ride through time you won't forget. It's the birth of the Templars. It started with dust and blood. The year was 1099. The streets of Jerusalem, once sacred, were now stained red. Crusaders, driven by a divine mission and fueled by dreams of glory, had taken the city in a storm of steel and flame. The first crusade was over. The Holy Land, they believed, had been reclaimed. But peace, that was another matter entirely. 4. Pilgrims, ordinary Christians traveling from Europe to visit Jerusalem's sacred sites, the road was anything but safe. Bandits, rogue mercenaries, and remnants of Islamic resistance turned those dusty highways into death traps. These were not soldiers. These were fathers, mothers, monks, and nuns, defenseless travelers being robbed, killed, or worse. And out of that chaos, a new idea was born. What if someone could protect them, not just as soldiers, but as brothers, warriors of faith? 1119, 2 decades after Jerusalem fell. A French knight named Hugues de Payens gathered 8 fellow knights and presented an unusual proposal to King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. They would form a new brotherhood, one that would take monastic vows, poverty, chastity, obedience, but wield the sword like warriors. Their mission is to defend the pilgrims, to guard the roads, to become, in essence, monks with swords. It sounded crazy, even dangerous. King Baldwin, desperate for order in the region, agreed. And so, the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, soon to be known as the Knights Templar, were born. Their headquarters? A humble wing of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, believed at the time to be built on the ruins of Solomon's Temple, one of the holiest sites in biblical history. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. There were 9 men, poor, under-equipped, devout, and yet, the world would soon bow before them. In the beginning, no one took them seriously. They weren't wealthy. They had no grand castles, no shiny armor. In fact, their early seal showed 2 knights riding a single horse, a symbol of their poverty. But what did they have? Purpose. The Templars were fanatical in their discipline. They lived like monks, praying, fasting, sleeping on hard beds, but trained like elite soldiers. They weren't fighting for land or riches. They believed they were fighting for God, and that, perhaps, was their most dangerous weapon. Word of their piety and bravery spread quickly. These were not knights of luxury. These were men who would ride into battle with white tunics, marked only by a red cross, and fight without fear. And soon, Europe noticed. In 1129, just 10 years after their founding, the Templars were officially endorsed by the Catholic Church at the Council of Trent. This wasn't just a formality. It was a divine seal of approval. Pope Honorius II blessed the order. Bernard of Clairvaux, a hugely influential abbot and later saint, became their public advocate. He wrote passionately in their defense, arguing that theirs was a new kind of knighthood, one that served both the sword and the cross. And with that papal blessing came something even more potent than swords: immunity. The Pope declared that the Templars answered to no king, no prince, no bishop, only the Pope himself. They could cross borders freely. They paid no taxes, could build fortresses and churches without permission. In short, they became untouchable. But why did people trust them so quickly? Because the Templars embodied the medieval ideal, the Christian warrior. In an age when knights were often seen as brutal, greedy mercenaries, the Templars stood apart. They didn't drink. They didn't gamble. They didn't chase women or riches. They lived under strict rules, codified in a document called the Latin Rule, which controlled everything from what they ate to how often they bathed. And in battle, they were fearsome. Templars didn't retreat unless outnumbered 3-1, and even then, only with permission. They rode in tight formation. Their discipline, silence, and unity unnerved their enemies. Many believed they were protected by God or possessed by something even darker. The mystique began to grow. And as the Crusades continued, Templars became the elite vanguard of Christian armies. They weren't just bodyguards for pilgrims anymore. They were the tip of the spear in every major campaign. From Antioch to Acre, their rise wasn't just military, it was spiritual. Across Europe, kings and nobles began donating land, money, and manpower to the Templars. Why? Because doing so wasn't just charitable, it was holy. To fund the Crusades and support the Holy Land was seen as the ultimate Christian act. And who better to manage those funds than the warrior monks? The Templars soon found themselves not just managing military operations, but vast networks of estates, farms, and treasuries. Their commanderies, local Templar headquarters popped up across France, England, Portugal, Spain, and beyond. Each one became a hub of religious, military, and financial activity. Some of these commanderies even trained future knights. Others stored treasure, managed documents, or minted coinage. Yes, the Templars had their own currency. Before long, they became Europe's most reliable financial institution. That's right. The monk warriors became medieval bankers, but we'll come back to that in a later chapter. For now, picture this. 1,000 years ago, a convoy of Christian pilgrims wound its way through the rocky roads of the Holy Land. Bandits lie in wait.
Nice.
Knives drawn, and suddenly cresting the hill, a formation of white-cloaked riders appears. No banners, no words, just steel and silence. The bandits flee. The pilgrims are saved. The Templars ride on. This was the image that spread through Christendom. Not just warriors, just monks, but saviors. By the mid-1100s, the Templars were no longer just a curiosity. They were a global power. They had the Pope's blessing. They had armies. They had gold. And they had the people's trust. But power, as history teaches us, is never without a price, and in the shadows. That price was already being prepared, because for every noble who admired the Templars, there was a king who feared them. Rise of a holy empire by the time the 12th century was in full swing. The Knights Templar were no longer the poor, dusty band of idealists who had once ridden a single horse between them. They were a force, empire within an empire, their white mantles and red crosses became a symbol that struck awe and fear alike. From Jerusalem to Paris, from the cliffs of Portugal to the sands of Acre, the Templars were everywhere. And they weren't just fighters anymore, they were builders, bankers, diplomats, and for some, shadow rulers. But how did this once tiny order spread like wildfire across Europe and the Holy Land? Let's start with the map. The Templar Network, a medieval web picture, medieval Europe, scattered, chaotic, filled with warring lords and petty kings. No phones, no banks. No way to send money from England to Jerusalem without it being robbed. 10 times over, the Templars fixed that. Their commanderies. Those regional hubs we touched on earlier became part of a sprawling infrastructure unlike anything Europe had ever seen. There were hundreds of them, each self-sufficient, each loyal to the Grand Master at the top. Need to send money from Paris to Acre? No problem. A noble could walk into a Templar house in France, hand over a sack of gold, and receive a coded document, a medieval check, essentially. That document could then be redeemed in the Holy Land. The Templars had developed the first international banking system, and it was secure, it's fast, and critically trustworthy. Why? Because the Templars were seen as holy. Stealing from them was like stealing from God. Not even kings wanted that curse. This financial genius funded wars, built castles, and oiled the wheels of diplomacy. But it also made the Templars rich, incredibly rich, and with riches came influence. From sword to scepter, the politics of the Templars weren't just a military brotherhood anymore. They were now advisors to kings, confidants of popes, and power players in the shadowy Game of Thrones. They could lend money to kingdoms, provide troops, build fortifications. Need a secure place to store your crown jewels? The Templars had you covered. They were granted lands by nobles who wanted to buy favor with God. They were allowed to operate their own ships, even their own fleet, turning them into naval merchants. And slowly, their reach became continental. In Spain and Portugal. They fought alongside Christian rulers in the Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to reclaim Iberian territory from Muslim rule. In return, they were rewarded with castles, lands, and even seats at court. In the Holy Land, they built fortress monasteries unlike anything seen before, crack day chevaliers. In modern-day Syria, Castle Pilgrim near Acre, these weren't just strongholds. They were cities behind walls, housing hundreds, stocked with supplies for years of siege. Their architectural styles, sturdy, minimal, purposeful, became iconic. Some believe Templar building techniques were passed on to later Gothic cathedrals. Others whisper about esoteric knowledge, the sacred geometry secrets of Solomon's Temple. That part we'll explore later, but the fact remains. The Templars were now more than warriors. They were a global institution, and with that power came rumors, whispers in the shadows, mystique, and myth. Even during their rise, the Templars were wrapped in mystery. Their secret rituals, private chapels, and guarded brotherhood made them the subject of speculation. What happened during initiation? What vows were spoken in the candlelit silence of their temples? Some claimed they worshipped strange idols, and they kissed each other in dark ceremonies, invoking pagan spirits. It was nonsense, probably, but the Templars did embrace secrecy. And in an age where knowledge meant power, secrecy was seen as dangerous. Their very name, poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, evoked ancient wisdom. Some believed they had found treasures beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Holy relics, lost scriptures, maybe even the Holy Grail itself. Was it fantasy? It's likely, but the Templars never denied the rumors. Silence, as history shows, is often louder than words. The code of the Templar, a way of life. What made the Templars different from every other knightly order? Discipline. Templars weren't allowed to gamble, drink, curse, or even eat too luxuriously. They slept in shared dormitories, wore simple clothes, obeyed without question. Their rule, written in Latin, was stricter than most monastic orders. It controlled when they prayed, how they fought, what they wore, and even how they sat at meals. Each knight had 3 horses. 1 squire, a sword, a lance, a shield. No gold, no personal wealth. Everything belonged to the order, even in death. Their bodies were buried without inscriptions. No ego, no glory, only God. But that doesn't mean they were without ambition. The Templars had a clear goal, to defend the Holy Land, and they pursued it with absolute focus. But war is not always won by zeal alone. And as the 13th century dawned, the tide began to turn. The Crusader crisis, a holy war in decline. Crusades were meant to be temporary, a surge of Christian might to reclaim and defend sacred territory. But the Muslim world wasn't staying down. Influential leaders like Saladin rose to challenge the Crusader states. Skilled, charismatic, and politically savvy, Saladin reconquered Jerusalem in 1187. A devastating blow to Christian morale. The Templars fought bravely, often to the last man. But they couldn't hold the tide forever. Crusader strongholds began to fall, and fighting among Christian factions weakened their cause. European support waned. New crusades were launched, the Third, the Fourth, even the ill-fated Children's Crusade, but none reclaimed Jerusalem by the late 1200s. It was clear the Holy Land would not be held in 1291. The city of Acre, the last major Crusader bastion, fell to Muslim forces. The Templars fought to the bitter end. When the final tower collapsed into the sea, it was the symbolic death, knell of Christian rule in the East. And with the Holy Land lost, what was the point of the Templars anymore? An order without a war, the brewing storm back in Europe, the Templars returned to their commanderies. They were still wealthy, still powerful, but their purpose, their reason for existing, had been cut out from under them. To the kings of Europe, they began to look like a threat. They had no army to fight, no war to win, and yet they held vast lands, massive treasure, and allegiance only to the Pope. That's a dangerous combination, especially if you're a king in debt, especially if your name is Philip IV of France. But that part of the story comes later. For now, picture Europe in uneasy peace. The holy wars are over. The Templars, once saviors of Christendom, now seem like silent giants, ancient war machines parked in every country, and some began to wonder, what happens when those machines are turned against their own creators? Secrets behind the crosshairs. Something undeniably captivating about a symbol, especially one as simple and haunting as the red cross of the Knights Templar. A crimson blade, slashed across a field of white. No ornamentation, no family crest, just blood on purity. But this cross was more than a battlefield insignia. It was the mark of an idea, a code, a way of life. A mystery that stretched from dusty roads in Jerusalem to the cathedrals of Europe. And for centuries, people have asked the same question. What did it really mean? A cross with a message. Let's start with the obvious. The red cross was a Christian symbol. It represented sacrifice, a reference to the crucifixion of Jesus. For the Templars, who believed they were Christ's warriors on earth, it was a badge of both honor and mortality. But there was a deeper layer. Wearing the cross meant you were ready to die, that you had already given up your life the moment you took your oath. Templar knights rode into battle not to survive, but to serve. To die was glory. To retreat was a shame. This wasn't just devotion. It was ideology, a psychological weapon. Enemy. Armies feared the Templars because they never hesitated. They didn't break ranks. They didn't flinch. And the red cross pinned to every chest, painted on every shield, reminded everyone that these men fought for something beyond this world. But that's only the surface. Behind the simplicity of the cross were symbols, numbers, and geometry that whispered of something ancient. The geometry of God Templar architecture wasn't just practical. It was intentional, and some believe encoded. Round churches, like the famous Temple Church in London, mirrored the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, a place believed to be the site of Jesus' burial and resurrection. But round shapes were rare in medieval architecture. So why did the Templars build them? Some scholars believe these circular chapels were based on sacred geometry, ancient mathematical principles tied to harmony, divinity, and even the structure of the universe. Circles represented eternity, squares represented earth. The triangle. The Holy Trinity. The Templars used these forms in everything from floor plans to fortress blueprints. Some believe they inherited these ideas from early Christian mystics. Others, it's just more esoteric sources. Did the Templars uncover lost knowledge during their time in Jerusalem? It's possible. They had years of access to the Temple Mount, digging, searching, praying. And while historical records are sparse, legends speak of hidden chambers, scrolls, and ancient relics buried beneath the ruins. Could this be where their obsession with certain symbols and secrecy began? The Templar cipher, though they were men of faith, the Templars were also men of strategy. Communication between commanderies had to be secure, especially when transporting treasure or military plans, so they used codes. We know that Templar documents often included sigils, glyphs, and shorthand that modern scholars still struggle to fully interpret. These weren't just abbreviations. Some appear to follow unique, numeric patterns or symbolic logic. Some Templar stones and seals bear carvings that defy translation, suggesting either lost languages or ciphers designed to be indecipherable. To outsiders, the most famous, the Beauseant, the Templar battle standard, half black, half white, represented the duality of the order, monks and warriors, peace and war, duality and blood. Duality was everywhere in Templar ideology. They believed that holiness could be served through violence, that humility and power could coexist, that the cross and the sword were not in conflict, but in harmony. Initiation rites and inner circles, much of the mythos surrounding the Templars, comes from their initiation rituals, which were conducted in secret, witnessed only by the inner circle. New recruits had to denounce personal property, take a vow of chastity, swear allegiance not to a nation, but to the order alone. But rumors swirled. When the Templars were arrested decades later, their inquisitors accused them of bizarre rites, spitting on the cross, kissing each other in strange places, worshipping a bearded head called Baphomet. Modern historians widely agree that these were likely fabrications, confessions extracted under torture. But why did people believe them? Because the Templars had always hidden things. Their rituals, their passwords, even their burial sites, and secrecy breeds suspicion. It's said that the Templars buried their dead without names or symbols, sometimes in cryptic positions, cross-legged, arms crossed, facing east. Some tombs suggest astronomical alignments, coincidence, or cosmic design. You may never know. The Templar vaults, legend or legacy. One of the most enduring myths is that the Templars, during their time in Jerusalem, discovered a hidden treasure beneath the Temple Mount, perhaps the Ark of the Covenant, or scrolls from Solomon's era. There's no solid proof, but the timing is curious. The Templars arrived poor. Within a few years, they were the wealthiest order in Christendom. Some suggest they found documents, knowledge that gave them political leverage. Others think they uncovered relics of immense religious value, and they guarded it all fiercely. Many castles featured underground vaults, trapdoors, tunnels that led nowhere or somewhere. After the fall of the order, some of these chambers were found, empty, cold, whispering of things, long gone or moved. The cross that endured despite the orders. Eventual downfall, their symbol. The Red Cross never vanished. It was adopted by other groups, reused, repurposed, revived. You'll find it in modern military insignias, in flags, in fiction, and in the conspiracy theories that never die. Templar imagery has been tied to the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and even to American founding myths. Whether or not those connections are real is up for debate, but what's undeniable is the staying power of that symbol. Carved into stone, whispered through centuries, and carried into every war where belief and steel collide. The money, the power, the network. We often remember the Templars for their swords, their faith, and their dramatic downfall. But hidden beneath the Crusader myths is something even more astonishing. They didn't just shape religious history. They quietly changed the global economy. The Knights Templar built what many historians now call the first international financial system. They managed wealth across continents. They issued credit. They moved gold with more efficiency than kings, and at their peak, they were richer than entire nations. So how did a group of warrior monks invent banking? Let's follow the money. From battlefield to bank vault, it started with a problem. Noblemen from Europe needed to get to the Holy Land, but they also needed to bring resources: gold, jewels, letters of credit. Transporting all that treasure through pirate-infested waters or across war-torn lands is not exactly safe. Entered the Templars. They already had commanderies across Europe and the Middle East. They had armed convoys, trusted agents. Vaults were built into stone fortresses. So they offered a solution. Give us your gold in London. We'll make sure you can access it in Jerusalem. And it worked. The Templars issued documents, marked with secret symbols and coded terms that functioned much like checks. These could be exchanged for money in another region. In doing this, the Templars eliminated the need to carry physical wealth. That alone changed everything. Europe's most trusted middlemen, but they didn't stop at transfers soon. Nobles were leaving, their estates in Templar hands. Kings deposited war chests in their treasuries. Even the church trusted the Templars with its wealth, a symbol of just how secure, politically neutral, the order appeared. The Templars lent money at low or no interest, at least publicly, because usury charging interest was banned by the church, but behind the scenes, they used fees, exchange rates, and service charges to get around that. They weren't just storing wealth, they were investing it, managing it, growing it. They became landlords too, collecting rents from thousands of farms across Europe. They ran vineyards, mills, breweries, blacksmith shops. Every bit of profit went straight into the order's coffers. Imagine modern-day organization that's simultaneously a military force, religious movement, a real estate empire, and a multinational bank. That's what the Templars became. The Grand Treasuries. One of the most important Templar roles was safe storage. Their treasuries, thick-walled, windowless rooms guarded day and night, became the medieval equivalent of Swiss vaults. And they weren't just storing coins. They kept jewels, documents, relics, and even royal treaties under lock and key. Some Templar fortresses were believed to hold the dowries of queens, the emergency funds of kings, and the debt notes of entire kingdoms. The Paris Temple, one of their largest European commanderies, became a central hub for financial operations. Some believe it was the true Bank of Europe for decades. And remember, the Templars answered only to the Pope. No king could audit them. No bishop could tax them. No one knew exactly how much they had, and that made them dangerous. Kings in debt, Templars in trouble by the 1300s. European monarchs were frequently borrowing from the Templars, especially during times of war. But loans come with strings. And when the lenders wear armor and carry swords, the balance of power shifts uncomfortably. One man in particular began to feel that shift. King Philip IV of France. Philip was deeply in debt to the Templars. His wars had drained the treasury, his court was lavish, and worst of all, he couldn't touch the Templars' wealth, at least, not legally, unless he could prove they weren't so holy after all, unless he could turn public opinion against them, unless he could convince the Pope himself that these warrior monks were frauds, heretics, and blasphemers hiding behind a cross. That plan was already forming in his mind, but for now, the Templars were still at the height of their power. A shadow empire, there was no single capital of the Templar Empire. Power was spread by design. The Grand Master ruled from Jerusalem, then Acre, and Cyprus, after the fall of the Holy Land. But real authority rested in the network, hundreds of commanderies reporting up a chain of command, each one operating semi-independently. This decentralization allowed the Templars to survive wars, plagues, and politics, but it also made them harder to control. They had their own ships, which they used to transport people, goods, and secrets. Some say they even ran shipping routes between Europe and North Africa, possibly even to the British Isles and Scandinavia. They had uniform laws across countries, uniform currency systems, and most importantly, a trusted internal communication system that allowed them to operate faster and more securely than any medieval government. They were, in a very real sense, the first corporation, a religious corporation with an army and a private fleet. Sound unsustainable? You'd be right. The turning point by the dawn of the 14th century, the Templars had lost their original mission. Defending the Holy Land, Jerusalem, was gone. The Crusader states were history, and with no more crusades to fund, the Templars seemed less like warriors of God and more like wealthy aristocrats with tax-exempt privileges. Public opinion began to shift. Some called them corrupt. Others claimed they lived in luxury, defying their vows of poverty. Even within the church, murmurs of doubt spread. And all the while, King Philip watched. He knew Europe was souring on the Templars. He knew the Pope was aging and vulnerable. And he knew that if he moved at the right moment, with the right accusations, he could wipe the order off the map and claim their wealth for France. The trap was nearly set, and the Red Cross was about to be stained in a way it could never be washed clean. Enemies in high places, power rarely fades quietly. And for the Knights Templar, Once the most feared and revered force in all Christendom, their fall was not just a tragedy. It was an ambush. By the early 1300s, the Templars had become a problem, not because they were corrupt or weak or heretical, but because they were rich, influential, and answered to no one but the Pope. That kind of independence. It made kings nervous, especially one king in particular, Philip IV of France, also known as Philip the Fair. He was handsome, calculating, and ruthlessly ambitious. And he was in deep financial trouble. Philip had borrowed vast sums from the Templars to fund his wars with England and Flanders. His coffers were dry, his debts were suffocating. But worst of all, he saw an entire empire of wealth, just beyond his grasp, locked away in Templar vaults across France. Unless, of course, he could destroy the order. The smear campaign begins. Philip knew he couldn't just march in and seize the Templars' property. The order had the full backing of the church. They were considered holy warriors, untouchable. So he launched a whisper campaign, a slow poison. He paid informants. He fueled rumors. He planted doubts in clerical circles. Whispers of secret rites, strange idols, blasphemous oaths, and unholy rituals began to swirl. The most dangerous accusation? That the Templars were no longer Christian at all, but heretics, hiding behind their sacred cross. And at the center of Philip's plan was a man who would do his bidding, Pope Clement V. Clement was weak, politically indebted to Philip and eager to avoid conflict. Though he had no real evidence, he didn't stop the king's plans either. What followed was one of the most calculated takedowns in history. The day the cross turned Black Friday, October 13, 1307. It began at dawn. Across France, soldiers raided. Templar commanderies in a coordinated strike. Doors smashed open. Knights were dragged from their beds. Chests cracked open. Documents seized. And everywhere silence and shock. Hundreds of Templars were arrested simultaneously. The charges: heresy, devil worship, sodomy, spitting on the cross, worshipping idols, the reality. Manufactured confessions, extracted under torture. Knights were burned, whipped, starved. Some had teeth pulled out, limbs broken, fingernails torn. Anything to force them to say what Philip needed them to say. It worked, under unbearable pain. Many confessed to crimes they didn't understand. Others went silent and died nameless in prison. A few recanted, only to be executed as liars. Philip's plan had worked. He now had the legal and moral pretext to confiscate Templar property, castles, lands, gold, documents, all fell into the hands of the French crown. The Templar network, once so formidable, was collapsing. The Pope follows suit. Pope Clement V, caught between scandal and pressure from Philip, tried to maintain appearances. At first he ordered his own investigation, but the momentum was too strong. In 1312, the Council of Vienne, Clement officially dissolved the Knights Templar, not because they were guilty, but to preserve the peace of the church. It was a carefully crafted lie. Many within the church knew the charges were false. Several other European monarchs in England, Portugal, and Germany refused to follow France's brutal example. Some simply absorbed Templar properties into their own military orders. But the damage was done. The name Templar had been stained, and the order would never recover. The last Grand Master. The final blow came in 1314. Years after the mass arrests, Jacques de Malle, the last Grand Master of the Templars, had spent years imprisoned in France. He was interrogated, tortured, and humiliated, but never truly broken. At his final public confession, Malle stunned the crowd. Instead of confirming his guilt, he recanted everything. Loudly, clearly, he denounced the trials as a fraud, declared the Templars innocent, and demanded justice. Philip was furious. That same night, Malle and another high-ranking Templar were sentenced to death. A pyre was built on the Aldela site in the middle of the Seine River in Paris. They were burned alive. Witnesses said Malle stood firm as the flames rose. No screaming. No begging. just a final prayer and a curse upon those who had betrayed. The order, according to legend, called both the king and the pope to stand before God within a year. History tells us they both died within months. What remained? With the order dissolved, Templar assets were supposed to be transferred to the Hospitallers, another Christian military group. But in France, Philip kept the lion's share for himself. The Templar castles were emptied. Their treasuries were looted. Their documents were destroyed or hidden. Their graves, if marked at all, soon disappeared into the dirt. But not everything was lost. Some Templars escaped, slipping into other orders, vanishing into monastic life, or fleeing to countries where the persecution didn't reach. A few crossed into Scotland, others into Portugal, and with them, the rumors spread. The Templars had taken their treasure and hidden it, that they had warned each other ahead of the raids, that their secrets, their codes, their relics, their knowledge survived, waiting to be found. And with those whispers, the legend grew. Torture, trials, and the fall of the Knights Templar wasn't just a political maneuver. It was a spectacle of pain, humiliation, and fire. And it wasn't over quickly. After their arrest on that cold Friday the 13th in 1307, the Templars weren't simply thrown into cells and forgotten. They were dragged through a years-long gauntlet of interrogations, trials, forced confessions, and public burnings. A grim theater designed not only to destroy the order, but to erase its dignity. What happened during these years is one of the darkest and most mysterious chapters in medieval history, the mechanics of a witch hunt once the Templars were imprisoned. The Inquisition moved in. This was no ordinary court. The Inquisition was a church-backed apparatus designed to root out heresy, and its methods were terrifying. Suspects were presumed guilty. The evidence was flimsy. Torture was not just allowed, it was standard. Knights who had once commanded fortresses now found themselves naked, shackled, and tossed into damp, rat-infested dungeons. They were denied food, sleep, light, and then came the interrogations in France alone. Over 130 Templars were tortured, sometimes for weeks, sometimes until death. They were accused of blasphemy, idolatry, spitting on the cross, desecrating holy images, and secret homosexual rituals. The goal was never the truth. It was a submission. The tools of pain Templars were subjected to the full horror of medieval torture, the rack, which dislocated limbs, tore muscle from bone, strappado, where a rope tied to the wrists was used to suspend them before dropping, dislocating the shoulders, hot coals pressed to the soles of their feet, the thumbscrew, crushing fingers one turn at a time. Some were starved for weeks, others denied water. Many went mad from isolation and pain. Faced with this, even the most disciplined knights broke. They confessed to anything their inquisitors demanded. One knight reportedly claimed to have seen a cat idol-worshipped in a secret ceremony. Another said new initiates were told to renounce Christ and kiss their recruiter in inappropriate places. Did any of these things actually happen? Highly unlikely. But by now it no longer mattered. The broken word what made this torture even more devastating was the betrayal. The Templars believed the church would protect them. They had served faithfully for nearly 2 centuries. They were warriors of the cross, not enemies of it. But the papacy, under the pressure of King Philip IV, failed them. Pope Clement V, instead of defending the order, demanded that they submit to church courts and obey his decrees. At first he hesitated. He sent letters. He questioned the evidence, but then he folded. By 1308, Clement had authorized formal inquisitions across all of Christendom. The trials had gone global. Some countries, like England, Aragon, and Portugal, showed more restraint. In some cases, their local inquisitors refused to use torture or found the charges baseless. But in France, where Philip held the most power, the brutal campaign continued. The silent ones, not every Templar confessed. A few stood firm, even under unbearable pain. They were branded relapsed heretics, meaning they had rejected a previous confession. This was punishable by death by fire. Public executions, were held in marketplaces. Crowds gathered, pyres were stacked high. The condemned were tied to stakes, their white mantles stripped away, placed with sackcloth. Some shouted defiance as the flames climbed, some prayed in silence. Some, it was said, stood completely still, refusing to scream, refusing to give their enemies the satisfaction to burn for Christ. In their minds was not failure, but final victory. The mystery of the idol, one of the strangest accusations, was that the Templars worshipped an idol named Baphomet. Descriptions varied. Some said it was a severed head with glowing eyes. Others claimed it was a bearded, horned figure. Some said it could speak. Others say it heals wounds. But the origin of this name Baphomet is unclear. Some scholars suggest it was a misheard version of Muhammad, implying secret Islamic ties. Others think it was an invented word, born of fear and myth. To this day, no idol has ever been found. No solid evidence of these rituals has surfaced, but the image stuck. Baphomet became one of the most infamous occult figures in history. Eventually, adopted by later secret societies and even by satanic imagery centuries later, a powerful reminder of how a lie, if repeated often enough, becomes a symbol. The fate of the ordinary Templar while the Grand Master and his inner circle took center. Stage thousands of ordinary Templars, men who had simply farmed, prayed, or managed estates, were caught in the chaos. Many were imprisoned for years without trial. Some were released and forced to join other monastic orders. Some simply disappeared, vanished into villages, changed names, removed the cross from their cloaks, and never spoke of the order again. A few took to the seas. A few fled north. A few may have carried secrets with them, but for most, their story ended in silence. No legacy, no records, no grave markers. Just the faint memory of the Red Cross and a name that once echoed across continents. The vanishing order the fires had burned. The confessions had been carved from screams. The Pope had dissolved the order, but the story of the Knights Templar wasn't over. In fact, some believe it was just beginning, because while many Templars were imprisoned, tortured, or executed, not all were caught. Some escaped, some vanished, and with their disappearance came questions. Legends and conspiracies that still echo today, whispers of hidden treasure, secret ships, and a brotherhood that never truly died. The escape routes. King Philip moved against the Templars in France. He did so quickly and ruthlessly. But outside of France, things played out very differently. In England, King Edward II was skeptical of the accusations. In Germany and Hungary, many nobles refused to arrest Templars at all. And in Scotland, the Templars were effectively ignored. Thanks to the country being excommunicated at the time for defying the Pope, this fragmented response created windows of escape. Templars in Spain, Portugal, and Scotland took advantage of local protection. Many shaved their beards, swapped cloaks, and vanished into the countryside. Some were absorbed into other knightly orders, especially in Portugal, where King Denis rebranded them as the Order of Christ. Same members. Property, just a new name. But others weren't heard from again. Where did they go? The fleet that vanished. One of the most enduring legends involves the Templar treasure and the mysterious disappearance of their fleet. Just days before the arrests in France, the Templars' ships at the port of La Rochelle suddenly vanished. No records, no ships found. No explanation? Some say they fled under the cover of darkness, carrying gold, relics, and secret documents. Others believe the Templars had been warned, perhaps by insiders, in the royal court or sympathetic clergy. And here's where the theories explode. Some say the fleet sailed to Portugal, joining the Order of Christ. Others claim they went to Scotland, aiding Robert the Bruce in the Battle of Bannockburn, a tale popular in Scottish lore. And then, the boldest theory of all, the Templars crossed the Atlantic, centuries before Columbus. Some speculate they reached North America, hiding their knowledge and wealth in the New World, giving rise to tales of buried treasure, strange stone carvings, and Templar symbols found on early American soil. There's no hard proof, but the mystery It refuses to die. Templars in the shadows as the flames of persecution died down. The idea of the Templars lingering in secret took root. This wasn't just historical curiosity. It became a mythic narrative. Secret meetings, hidden knowledge, initiations passed down in whispers. In the 1700s, the Freemasons, an emerging fraternal order, began claiming descent from the Templars. Their rituals, symbols, and fascination with ancient wisdom all seemed eerily familiar. Did they truly preserve the Templar legacy? Or did they simply adopt the legend, draping themselves in the romanticism of a fallen order? Whatever the truth, the connection stuck. Even today, many Masonic rites pay homage to the Templars. And countless conspiracy theories hinge on that supposed lineage, from the Da Vinci Code to National Treasure. The idea that the Templars didn't die, but went underground, survives in modern culture. What happened to the treasure? Ah, the treasure. The idea that the Templars possessed vast hidden wealth, not just in gold, but in religious relics, sacred texts. Even the Holy Grail has fueled speculation for centuries. In truth, their treasure may have simply been land, livestock, coin, and documents. But rumors claimed otherwise. Some tales say they guarded the Ark of the Covenant, others found Solomon's secrets beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Still others claim they hid their fortune in coded maps, encrypted vaults, or beneath the floors of cathedrals. But so far, no confirmed treasure has ever been found, and maybe that's the point. The real treasure of the real treasures may have been knowledge, strategies, networks, financial innovations, ideas that outlived the order itself, ideas that could reshape kingdoms. The Portuguese connection, Portugal, deserves a closer look. When the Pope disbanded the Templars in 1312, most of their property across Europe was seized or redistributed, but in Portugal, something unusual happened. King Denis, who respected the Templars, deeply created the Order of Christ and transferred the Templars' lands and assets to this new group. And guess what? The Order of Christ went on to play a central role in Portugal's Age of Discovery. Famous explorers like Henry the Navigator were members. The cross of the order, strikingly similar to the Templar Red Cross, appeared on Portuguese sails for generations. Coincidence? Or did the Templar legacy continue under a new flag, guiding explorers across uncharted seas? Templar ghosts in Scotland, where papal influence was weak. The Templars may have found safe haven. Some legends claim that Templar knights fought alongside Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, a year after the execution of Grand Master Jacques de Molay. It's said they turned the tide of battle with a mysterious cavalry charge that no one expected, whether fact or folklore. Scotland became another supposed refuge. Centuries later, structures like Roslin Chapel, with its strange carvings and Masonic connections, fueled theories that Templar secrets were hidden in stone, waiting to be discovered. The curse of the Grand Master. Before we move on, there's one last eerie detail. When Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, was burned alive in 1314, witnesses claimed he shouted a curse from the flames. Pope Clement, King Philip, I summon you to judgment before God within a year. Strangely, both Pope Clement V and King Philip IV died within that very year. Coincidence? Or was de Molay's final breath more than a curse, but a prophecy? Either way, it added fuel to the growing mythos, the idea that the Templars were touched by fate, and that those who betrayed them would never sleep easily. They never really left. So, did the Templars survive? We can't say for certain. Some probably faded into civilian life. Others may have joined other orders. And a few, just a few, may have carried the torch quietly, keeping their vows in secret. But the legend survived, and sometimes legends are more powerful than armies. Legacy of the Temple Event after their brutal downfall. The Knights Templar never really disappeared. Not from history, not from culture, and definitely not from the human imagination. Because centuries later, their symbols, ideals, and mysteries still surround us, etched into stone, woven into flags, and whispered about in books, films, and conspiracy theories. But how much of that is real? How much is just myth layered on myth? Let's dig through the ruins and see just how far their legacy really reaches. Architects of memory, one of the clearest places where the Templars left their mark is in architecture. All across Europe and the Holy Land, their distinctive round churches, fortified commanderies, strategic castles still stand. Many of their buildings followed a unique layout, inspired by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Round naves, central pillars, a symbolic return to the sacred origins of Christianity. Take the Temple Church in London, originally built by the Templars in the 12th century. It still stands today, right in the heart of the legal district, echoing the past amid glass towers and busy streets. Or Tamar Castle in Portugal, with its spiral layout and mysterious cross-shaped windows. These weren't just buildings, they were messages in stone, reminders of an order that once shaped the world, symbols that serve evade. You've seen it before. The red cross on white, the twin knights riding a single horse, the 8-pointed star. Templar iconography is everywhere, and it didn't vanish with the order's collapse. That red cross, for example, it later appeared on the sails of Portuguese ships during the Age of Exploration, on coins, on modern flags. Even in corporate logos and popular culture, it's more than a symbol, it's a brand. Centuries old, the Templar seal, showing 2 knights on 1 horse, originally symbolized their vows of poverty. But today, it's seen as a cryptic icon, hinting at brotherhood, secrecy, duality. And let's not forget the Templar motto, non nobis domini, non nobis, sed nomini tu, da gloriam. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory. It was carved into swords, recited before battle, and today, it still appears in Masonic halls and some military regiments. The Freemason connection now, here's where the story twists into mystery. Starting in the 18th century, Freemasons began claiming a connection to the Templars, not in a we're the same people way, but in a spiritual, symbolic lineage. They adopted Templar rituals, iconography, and even created Masonic degrees like Knight Templar as part of their system. Why? Because by then, the Templar name was legendary. Aligning with it gave Freemasonry a sense of noble, ancient authority, but some go further. There are theories that Freemasonry is the continuation of the Templars, that when the order was outlawed, its members went underground, disguising their meetings and evolving into the fraternity we know today. Is it true? Historically, the evidence is murky, but the idea is magnetic. In popular culture, fast forward to modern times, Templars are everywhere, from blockbuster movies to best-selling novels, video games, and TV documentaries. Think The Da Vinci Code, Assassin's Creed, National Treasure. In these stories, the Templars are secret keepers, treasure guardians, and architects of hidden truths. They're portrayed as either righteous protectors of ancient knowledge or shadowy conspirators, controlling the world from behind the scenes. Why this duality? Because the real Templars were complex warriors and monks, bankers and crusaders. They straddled power and piety, glory and corruption, and that makes them perfect for fiction. It's like they're historical clay ready to be reshaped into whatever myth we need, religious and political legacy. But the Templars didn't just shape fantasy. They left behind a serious influence on religion and politics. Their model of centralized organization, their transnational network, and their ability to operate semi-independently from kings and popes were unprecedented. It inspired later religious orders, administrative reforms, and even colonial enterprises. And then there's banking. The Templars developed early forms of financial instruments like letters of credit and protected deposits that laid the groundwork for modern banking. A pilgrim in the 12th century could deposit money in Paris and withdraw it in Jerusalem? All thanks to the Templars' accounting system. This was revolutionary. Today's international banks, They owe more to the Templars than they'd probably like to admit. Templars and national identities in some countries. The Templar identity became wrapped up in national wide well. Portugal, for example, turned the Order of Christ, its Templar successor, into a symbol of exploration, faith, and empire. The cross still appears on the national flag. Scotland embraced legends of Templar warriors aiding Robert the Bruce, symbols of resistance and loyalty, even in the United States. Some of the founding fathers were Freemasons inspired by Templar ideals. Washington's regalia, the layout of certain buildings and references in national architecture hint at deeper symbolic ties. Coincidence or quiet homage? A modern obsession, so why does the Templar myth persist? Maybe it's the blend of faith and power, sacrifice, and secrecy. Maybe it's because we crave stories where ancient knowledge lies just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered, or maybe we see a bit of ourselves in them. People are torn between spiritual ideals and worldly pressures. People who stood for something and paid the price. Their rise was meteoric. Their fall was catastrophic, but their legacy, it's immortal. Not because they planned it, but because we never stopped imagining them coming. Next, what if everything we thought we knew about the Templars is only half the truth? What if their deepest secrets, their greatest treasures, were never meant to be found? Secrets, symbols, and the Templar Code is about to begin. Secrets, symbols, and the Templar Code. Let's be honest, the more you learn about the Knights Templar, the more it feels like something is still hidden, a missing piece, an uncracked code. And maybe that's not by accident, because for centuries, people have whispered about a Templar secret, a truth so powerful, so dangerous, that it had to be buried, protected, or disguised behind riddles, symbols, and silence. But what could they have been hiding? Let's pull at the threads of myth, mystery, and meaning, and see just how deep the Templar Code might run. The treasure that vanished. It begins with the treasure. When King Philip IV moved to arrest the Templars in 1307, one of his motivations was greed. He was broke, and the order was rich, holding land, assets, gold, and secrets of banking. But here's where it gets weird. When royal agents stormed the the Templar headquarters, they found nothing. No gold, no artifacts, no ledgers, just emptiness. Some believe the Templars were tipped off that they moved their treasure just in time onto carts, or perhaps even ships, bound for distant shores. England, Scotland, Portugal, Switzerland. Or maybe Nova Scotia, centuries before Columbus. That's where the Oak Island theory comes in, a mysterious site in Canada where researchers claim to have found medieval symbols, tunnels, and stone markers linked to the Templars. No one's ever proven it, but no one's disproven it either. The Holy Grail, a Templar invention? Now let's talk about the Holy Grail, perhaps the most famous relic tied to the Templars. Traditionally, the Grail is the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, later said to have caught his blood at the crucifixion, a symbol of divine grace, eternal life, and ultimate truth. So, how do the Templars fit in? Well, in the 12th century, right when the Templars were rising, poets like Chrétien de Troyes began writing about Grail Knights and sacred relics. Some scholars believe these stories were inspired by, or even commissioned by, Templar circles. Others argue the Templars might have discovered something in Jerusalem, a relic or manuscript that sparked the Grail legend. Was it an actual cup, or something more symbolic? A bloodline, a truth that threatened to unravel centuries of doctrine. The Da Vinci Code played with this idea that the Grail wasn't a chalice, but a secret about Jesus' descendants. But while that theory is fun and controversial, it's still speculative. What's more important is how deeply tied the Templars became to this mythology, the protectors of sacred secrets, the last guardians of divine knowledge. Even if the truth is less cinematic, the idea endures. Templar cipher and symbolism beyond relics. The Templars left behind something even more enduring: symbols. These weren't random designs. They were coded, layered, and often mathematical in nature. Take the 8-pointed cross. It represents regeneration, balance, and cosmic order. Some say it mirrors ancient Babylonian symbols, or even pre-Christian solar cycles, or the rose and cross used in both Templar and later Rosicrucian traditions. Enlightenment. There are carvings in Templar chapels that hint at astronomical alignments, geometric patterns, and numeric codes. Some theorists believe these are breadcrumbs, pointing to hidden messages, locations, or esoteric teachings. Even their cathedrals and castles may contain alignments with solstices, equinoxes, or celestial events. Were the Templars simply devout builders, or secret code masters, embedding messages in mortar and stone? The Ark of the Covenant and Temple of Solomon. Then there's the theory that the Templars unearthed something in Jerusalem during their early years specifically. Under the Temple Mount, where their first headquarters were, the site of Solomon's temple, and possibly the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant, according to biblical tradition. The Ark was a gold-covered chest holding the 10 Commandments and was capable of unleashing divine power. Could the Templars have discovered ancient artifacts or scrolls beneath the temple ruins? There's no hard proof, but the possibility has fueled centuries of speculation, especially because they were the only outsiders allowed to dig and live on the Temple Mount for nearly a decade. If they did find something, what did they do with it? Hide it? Guard it? Pass it down through coded rituals and secret orders? The mystery only deepens. The China and parchment, a confession unsealed for centuries. The official line was this: the Templars were guilty of heresy, of spitting on the cross, worshipping idols, and engaging in secret pagan rites. But in 2001, a Vatican archivist named Barbara Frail discovered a long-lost document known as the Chinan Parchment. It revealed that Pope Clement V had secretly absolved the Templars of heresy in 1308. Yes, you read that right. The very church that allowed them to be destroyed had, behind closed doors, forgiven them. So why wasn't this made public? Because it would have undermined King Philip's actions and maybe revealed the political conspiracy behind their fall. This parchment doesn't just clear their name, it raises a chilling question. If the church knew the Templars weren't heretics, what were they really hiding? Modern Templar orders, you might be surprised to learn that the Knights Templar never fully died out. Today, there are multiple modern organizations claiming Templar heritage, some symbolic, others charitable, some shrouded in mystery. They host rituals, use ancient symbols, and often refer back to the original rule of the temple, a code of conduct written in the 12th century. Some are affiliated with Freemasonry, others operate independently, conducting quiet ceremonies in chapels, forests, and halls across Europe and North America. What do they believe? That they're the spiritual heirs of a noble mission? That the flame of the temple was never extinguished, only hidden? And that in a world of chaos, there's still a need for discipline, duty, sacred purpose? The code lives on, in the end, maybe. The true Templar code isn't about buried treasure or divine artifacts. Maybe it's about how humans tell stories, how we turn the past into mirrors for our hopes and fears. The Templars were real men, but they became more than that. They became a mythos, a language of power, secrecy, sacrifice, and destiny. Their code, it lives in fiction and architecture, in rituals and riddles, and maybe, just maybe, in the questions that keep you up at night. What if they did find something in Jerusalem? What if they did leave behind clues, scattered across continents, disguised in plain sight? And what if it's all been waiting just for you to connect the dots? The Templar afterlife, the year is 1314, Jacques de Malle, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, stands on a small island in the Seine River, in the heart of Paris. He's shackled, surrounded by flames, and facing death. But before the fire takes him, he shouts a curse. He calls out Pope Clement and King Philip by name. He says they'll both die within a year. And eerily they do. Was it a coincidence? Or did Damala's final words mark the beginning of something greater? A Templar afterlife. It's not in heaven or hell, but right here on earth. Even though their order was destroyed, the spirit of the Templars didn't vanish. It evolved. It slipped into secret chambers, crossed borders, and embedded itself in politics, mysticism, and myth for centuries to come. This is that story. Echoes in Freemasonry. Start with perhaps the most famous legacy, Freemasonry. In the 18th century, as Enlightenment ideas spread through Europe, Freemasonry emerged as a powerful fraternal movement, a blend of philosophy, architecture, ritual, and secrecy. But buried in its higher degrees is something curious: the Knight Templar degree. Coincidence? Or clue? Masonic lodges often use Templar-style regalia, red crosses, swords, and symbolic initiation rites that mirror those of the medieval Templars. Some lodges even claim direct descent from knights who escaped the purge, especially in Scotland, where Templars are believed to have fled after 1307. The Roslin Chapel, for instance, is often cited as a key link. Its architecture features unmistakable Templar motifs, including the Seal of Solomon and depictions of New World plants carved before Columbus. Are these just flourishes or breadcrumbs? The Templars in America, believe it or not, some researchers argue that Templar influence reached the Americas long before Columbus ever set sail. Theories swirl around the mysterious Kensington runestone in Minnesota is allegedly inscribed by Norse Templar explorers in the 14th century. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, a stone structure with architectural quirks some claim reflect Templar or Norse design. The famous Mystery of Oak Island, Nova Scotia, where supposed hidden tunnels, booby traps, and medieval artifacts hint at a buried treasure in Templar presence. None of it is definitively proven, but the pieces are strange enough to fuel centuries of speculation. And in stories like these, the Templars become more than historical. They become mythic engineers of the unknown, leaving behind puzzles for future minds to solve. Templar DNA in pop culture. Let's be honest, the Knights Templar never really left the stage. They're everywhere. In movies like Indiana Jones, National Treasure, and The Da Vinci Code. In games like Assassin's Creed, they're shadowy puppet masters behind global conspiracies. Even in books, comics, and anime, the Templar archetype returns, a warrior monk bound by duty, hiding a forbidden truth. Why are we still so fascinated? Because the Templars represent a perfect storm: sacred duty versus political betrayal, faith versus corruption, power versus secrecy. They're a mirror for every society's struggle with truth, loyalty, and hidden agendas. And the beauty is they're real. You don't have to invent them. You just have to wonder what they left behind. Modern-day Templar orders today, the Templar name, lives on in dozens of modern groups. Some are fraternal societies, some are philanthropic, some are religious. You'll find the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, a modern chivalric group dedicated to charitable causes. With members across the globe, there's also the Ordo Supremus, Elitarius Templi Hierosolomitani, a group with unrecognition that promotes Christian values and humanitarian aid. Most of these modern orders don't claim literal continuity from the medieval Templars, but they do inherit the spirit. Service, discipline, brotherhood, mystery, and they thrive because people still yearn for a deeper connection to history, to a sense of noble purpose in an uncertain world. The Vatican and the Templar rehabilitation for centuries. The Church stood by the original judgment of heresy, but in 2007, 700 years after the arrest of the Templars, the Vatican released the Chinon parchment to the public. It confirmed that Pope Clement V absolved the Templars in secret. In essence, clearing their name. This was a monumental shift. No formal apology was issued. But the document's release acknowledged a centuries-long injustice, one driven by political fear, not theological truth. It also reignited global interest in Templar. History books were written, Documentaries aired, and millions more people began asking, what else have we been told that isn't quite the full story? A living mystery. What's most remarkable is that the Templars were active for less than 200 years. That's it? But their legacy? It has outlived empires, religions, and revolutions. They became martyrs, villains, guardians, heretics, and saints. All depending on who's telling the story, they're infinitely adaptable, which is what gives their myths such staying power. For some, they're Christian warriors. For others, secret keepers of ancient knowledge. To some, they're a tragic cautionary tale about trust and betrayal. And yet through it all, they remain deeply human, bound by the same flaws, hopes, and fears that shape every age. The final question, so, where does this leave us? Are their Templar secrets still hidden? Are their descendants watching quietly from the shadows? Is the Holy Grail just a metaphor or a real object lost in time? No one knows for sure. But maybe the most powerful part of the Templar legacy is that we're still asking, still wondering, still following trails left centuries ago, and perhaps that's the real treasure. Not a chest of gold or an ancient scroll, but a living fire in the imagination, a spark that refuses to go out, a code not meant to be broken, but to be pondered forever. Because long after the last sword was sheathed, the Knights Templar never truly died. They simply became eternal. The end.